So is the bathroom still in between the hangers?
Yes.
Okay.
Or up the hanger. Okay. No, that's Jerry Van Grunsven.
Oh, but I don't see you. I see Tom.
Yeah, right there. It's that handsome guy right there with the aviator glasses. Are you up there? Let's see, who else? I'm trying to think if anybody's here.
Isn't Tom third from the left?
That's Chris Stenstrom. And, okay, who's up in this picture? Any old guys up in this picture? This is like 30 years ago. But they're all, yeah, I know, that they were. Okay, guys, we're going to get going here reasonably on time. And thanks for coming. Thanks for attending our December meeting in January, which we got postponed a little bit. There's Bob. How you doing? Good to see you again. Before we get going, let me ask any brand new guys here that have never been to a meeting before. Oh, there's a couple. Hey, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you very much for coming. Just to give you a little background, we meet every quarter, or try to, usually at this hangar or somewhere. And we have a couple winter meetings, usually a December and a March meeting. We have a little get-together at Bernie Weiss's hangar at Anoka in June, July. And then down at Faribault at Stein Air's hangar in September. So that's kind of what we do. We have a newsletter we put out every quarter. And I write that, which has been forever that I've been writing that, but that's the way it is. One thing I want to mention before we get started, and it's a sad note, Paul Hove, my hangar partner, has been in hospice care for the last, just a day or so. And I got a note last night that I don't think he had too much longer to be with us. He got cancer about 3 months ago, and it really took him really quickly. So I don't know the details just yet, but keep him in your thoughts and prayers. And it's been kind of a rough time for his family as well. So Paul and I have been hangar partners in this hangar for 21 years, and so he's a pretty good friend. And I'll let you know when I hear any more news on that. One thing, let's see, a couple little items. There's a little hangar sign over here. I'm sorry, who was the gentleman who brought that again? And your name again was? Dan. There's a cool little hangar sign that he's got up on the table that he found that you can have made with, maybe Dan will have some of the details on it about, you can put your van's airplane hanging up on the wall that way. It looks kind of cool. So this one little item is of note. Bernie Weiss is our treasurer. He's going to give us a little treasury report wherever he went. Bernie, where are you?
I'm right here.
You're right here. Come on up and tell us all the good stuff that's been going on. There you go. Have a mic.
Thanks. Well, okay, the good news is we have $2,682 in the bank, but that's way down. It turns out we've been deficit spending, which isn't the plan, but I'll just go through some of the expenses so you all see what we spend money on. We're about as cheap as you can be. Our web services, which is how we communicate all the tools that are for sale or all the fly-ins or the newsletter distribution, costs us $28 a month. So $336 a year. That's really cheap. These pastries and coffee that we do runs about $250 a meeting, and the club pays for 2 meetings. One is at Stein, and then the picnic costs about $650, depending on whether we get meat or not meat for that picnic. And then this year, as you read, we had that balance, which is good, and we decided to do something with it for the club. And so we bought a set of scales that Pete and Bill are going to work out a way to the instructions and the process by which you would borrow them. So that's always been something that individuals have had to buy. It's not just when you build your airplane. Turns out, like me, airplanes gain weight over time. So, it's a good idea every, 10 years at least to reweigh the airplane, make sure you update your stuff. Now, we've kept dues at $15 forever. And Doug, we have, about 200 people on the mailing distribution list?
There's, I think, about 290 actually people on the mailing list, of which about half are payers.
Okay, well, turns out only 81 people are paying the dues. So we're actually running a deficit of a couple $100, $300 a year. And we're going to fix that by building back the balance so that we can buy more tools, and we're raising the dues to $25. That isn't even an aviation unit. So that's why it's going up, so $25. And with that, we also have paid in the past, and I think we're going to make a contribution this month. When we have guest speakers, we often will pay for some of their transportation or something like that, just because it's taken them a lot of time to put together the presentation or what have you. And then today we have door prizes. So all small things, but we're going to go up to, by my definition, a quarter of an aviation unit. So anyway, that's the treasurer's report. We're in good shape, but we have to build back that balance a little.
Hey, Bernie, great, thank you. I thought we defined an aviation monetary unit as $1,000.
Yeah.
This is like, do the math.
It's a metric system.
Oh, metric. Okay, let me crank the gain down on this thing a little bit. Okay, maybe that won't be quite so ringy. Thank you, Bernie. That's great. The Pete Howell and Pete, why don't you come on up a little bit and talk a little bit about the scale thing and explain what the plan for that is, and you can use this one.
All right. Yeah, one of the challenges we've had, I think, if people have finished new airplanes, and as Bernie said, ongoing maintenance of these airplanes as they gain weight, has been finding scales. We had to go rent some. I know people have bought some. So we thought it might just be good to get a set of scales. We can use them on a library checkout basis. So we bought some. Bill and I checked them out the other day. We're in the process of building some platforms because the airplane has to be level in order to weigh it. We'll make those available as well. We'll keep them at our hangar at Anoka, and if someone wants to get them, they can give me a call or an email. I am recently retired, so I can get up there at any given time, hopefully. Thank you, thank you. But yeah, we'll keep it fairly informal, but these things are almost $1,000. We want to keep pretty good tabs on them. They're pretty much foolproof. There's not a lot of training to go with it, but we're going to put together a little sheet to show how they're used. And if someone needs some help, we can do it. If you want to bring your airplane over to Anoka, I or someone else can probably help you weigh your airplane, so we'll throw that out there as well. But I think it's a really good purchase for the club. We just have to, keep good control of those. We don't want someone to check them out and keep them for 6 months. So my brother's about 6'9", known as an enforcer. We can fly him in if someone keeps the scales for too long, so you're on warning for that. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Let me move the projector over a little bit, guys, so that it'll get the, let's over this way. Oh, good. Let me turn the lights off here, too. By the way, for you new guys, that picture up there is like some of the founding members of the RV Club. We started back around 1989, I think, roughly, in that neck of the woods. Tom Berge actually was one of the early presidents. Jerry Van Grunsven, who's standing up there, he was kind of the original president way back then. Jerry is the brother of Dick Van Grunsven. And I think all these other guys, anybody recognize their bodies up here? Okay, so we're all outgrown the club, but a lot of these guys have moved on to different locations. And anyway, we've been around a long time. Let's see. Let's get the glasses on to see what we're supposed to do next. Let me mention a couple things here. Let me turn we got the lights down. I'm going to talk briefly, just for a few minutes, about the noise situation on Lake Elmo Airport. I'm a member of the Lake Elmo Airport Advisory Council, which is kind of an organization that exists at all these MAC airports. It's kind of a liaison between the Airport Commission and airport users and the community, county commissioners, mayors, and things like this. So we get together every quarter. It's kind of interesting to see how this works out. The noise is the big issue around these airports. And if you look at some of these statistics here, which is kind of interesting, see if I get my little laser thing working. Lake Elmo Airport has 63% of all the noise complaints at the reliever airports are this airport. If you look at the operations, Flying Cloud is way bigger. We're this little bitty pile here. And why this is occurring is there's, unfortunately, a group of neighbors, about 16 of them, that consistently enter these noise complaints. These noise complaints, let's see, back up here. This gives you some idea of the numbers. There was 8,600 noise complaints in the third quarter of last year over the 12,000 operations. This is 16 homes that do all these complaints. So I've kind of brought this up to the Airport Commission a couple of times, not that I'm the expert, but when you realize that there's just kind of these vocal folks that live near here that just hit the computer like every, I don't know, hour, a couple times an hour, I think, sometimes when they're flying. You know, the success around the airport is great. We got a very active flight school. The airport's relatively busy compared to what it used to be. But I think the whole issue that I wanted to bring up is the fact that Matt goes through this a tremendous amount of effort to produce all this data. Maybe it's just to placate some of the neighbors, but this is a sound study that was done last August for a period of 7 days, and they track every single operation out of this airport. And it's all tracked like that, and of course, now that we all have ADS-B, you can't hide, as you know. So it's quite interesting. They track the noise complaints, the worst offenders, and I'm happy to say that RVs are up there on the top of the list of the significant offenders. Donovan's got his RV up there at the top, and I'm down here at the bottom. I'm not quite as noisy as he. Well, we're similar, 83 decibels, 84 decibels. So these are the worst airplanes that occurred during that time frame. The top was a BT-13 from, I think I was from South St. Paul, and the RB-9s, there's helicopters, 172s, whatever the case may be. So they track some of this stuff. And it's done very scientifically. They break this down by type of aircraft, and you can see that the 172s, I should say, of the flight school are the big offenders, et cetera, et cetera. So the bottom line is what I wanted to mention is the fact that a federally financed airport like our public use airport like Lake Elmo, there's really they cannot mandate a FAA quote approved noise abatement process. That's can't be done. The courts have determined that it can be a recommendation type of procedures for noise abatement out of an airport like this. So Lake Elmo does have a noise abatement process, a procedure that you can fly if you're aware of it, and I wasn't even aware of it until I got involved in this thing a little bit. So basically, if you fly out of this airport, the noisy offender people who record all this stuff are over here on the southeast corner. So when you take off on runway 14, there's not a whole lot you can really do about it. And RVs are noisy with having no mufflers in them. I'll kind of usually peel off to the left a little bit and head more that direction perhaps, but you still have to fly your airplane safely. That's kind of the bottom line. And the Airport Commission, MAC, is very supportive about pilots, and they explain this to all the neighbors every time we have these meetings, that here's what we have to do to operate safely, and we kind of enlighten them. And that's kind of just the way things are. There was an interesting statement made at the last meeting. One of the county commissioners here in Washington County finally got up and said to the neighbors, folks, we appreciate all your your complaints and what you go through, and we're glad you're here, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really probably not going to change because that's the way airports work. And so anyway, just to be aware of the fact that that's kind of your tax dollars at work, and that's what MAC does. One of the few things, many things they do, of course. Yeah.
Worth pointing out, because I'm sure people might think otherwise, not a single one of those complaints came from this new neighborhood.
Exactly.
They liked living there.
Yeah, that's true. This one, these folks over here in base housing don't seem to mind at all. But it's just all it takes is one or two rabble-rousers, I suppose. And I was talking to one of these meetings, talking to one of the county commissioners, maybe it was the mayor of Oak Park Heights or Lake Elmo, and she didn't know airplanes from a Chevrolet, frankly. But she said, I get complaints like this all the time, about the trains and the traffic, and there's trucks going down the highway, and it's kind of just the way things work in government. So anyway, that's kind of the story here on the noise situation. Yeah, questions?
Obviously, no airport's been built next to a housing area,
Yeah.
so we get that part. But have we got can we turn the scales on MAC a little bit and say, hey, can we invite our big offenders to come on the airport for a field day?
They do that. Right.
They'll become fans
Mm-hmm.
of access.
That actually has happened. They do have an airport day at each of these airports, kind of like a little picnic. And, they spread the word amongst these people. I don't know if they come or not, but that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, Donovan.
In response to that, the mayor and we were, and she was trying to figure it all out, so I took her flying. So she would understand that there's a better side of this.
So she could buy an RV on
She did enjoy her day.
I'm switching batteries here real quick.
Have any programs locally that can help us, or
I'm sorry, say again?
does AOPA have any programs locally?
I don't know about what they do about noise mitigation, things like that. Obviously, I suppose if you have airplanes over that all the time, it's always going to be an issue. MSP still is like a very noise-sensitive airport. Thousands of complaints. We go through all those procedures back in that Northwest and Delta uses. And that's just kind of... So anyway, just be aware of the fact that if you fly out of here, kind of steer clear a little bit. Nice thing about RVs is we can climb very quickly, even though they're very noisy airplanes, no doubt about that. So great. Okay, I'm gonna introduce Tom Berge. He's going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff in Berge World that's been going on the last few days, and it's always fascinating. But here you go, Tom. By the way, if you don't know Tom Berge, he is our RV guru. He's been building and flying these airplanes for longer than me, and knows everything about them.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, forever I think I'm coming up on 38 years involved in the RVs now. So a long, long time, and in the end, it's amazing what this thing has brought to me. I've really enjoyed it quite a bit. This first slide is John Aiden's airplane. Where's John at? There he is back there. We did the first flight, I think it was in December or so. John had an RV-7A, constant speed, and Garmin panel, of course. And so this is just a couple of statements on his. He had a hard start on it. One of the things that he ran into was there was no power to his ignition. And he had a Stein-built panel, and just if you guys have a Stein-built panel with PMags, thing to remember is that the circuit breaker that Stein puts in the panel has a wire going out to the PMags, but no power to the circuit breaker. So if you're building, keep eye on that. Just make sure that you got power, because no power in, no power out. PMags will not work. So did the first flight and got up over the top of the airport, and everything went really well. And so I decided, the engine kept running. That's always a nice thing to have. And I headed off to the southwest. This is out of Flying Cloud. And I don't know, I got maybe about 10 miles out, and my manifold pressure started to drop. It's like, ooh, well, that's interesting. And for you guys that are not constant speed pilots, that's how you set your powers, with manifold pressure. And so I thought, well, all right, so it slipped out. I'll go ahead and push the throttle back in a bit. It took a big push to get it back up over 24 inches of manifold pressure. And then it just continued to drop further. Now, first flight, I'm thinking, I can sit here and troubleshoot this, or I can turn my butt around and get back to Flying Cloud. And the interesting thing is my speed was really high. So the speed wasn't decaying as I was flying, but all right, this is not the place to be sitting here studying this, right? So we got on the ground, and John took the cowl off, and one thing that I had noticed is that he had daisy chained his grounds, the ground returns for each of his transducers on a terminal strip. So he fixed that, and the next time I took the airplane up, that seemed to go away. So I thought we'd had it fixed. Earlier this week, we were out flying, and it reared its ugly head again. So it's an indication problem. The airplane is not slowing down, it's not losing power, but it is an indication issue. And so the interesting thing is what I did is I took the airplane and I went on ahead and went in some banks and pulled some load on the airplane. And depending on which direction I was turning and how much load I put onto it, I could cause that manifold pressure to drop. So right now the thought is that it's screaming connection issue somewhere. So we're working on it. And what else? His radio was really rotten when you went to transmit on a number 1 comm. It's just tower could hear me real good, but when I transmitted, what popped up in my headset was just terrible. It turns out that what was happening was when I was transmitting on comm 1, it was tripping comm 2's audio, the squelch. Even though it's not on the same frequency, it was close enough to trip it. And there was a setting on the audio panel to mute the other comm, and that made that problem go away. So it's kind of interesting stuff. Next thing I'm getting involved in, and actually I just booked my airline flight this morning. I'm going to go look at an RV-14 tail wheel out in Afton, Wyoming. And this airplane has been rejected twice now, which is always an interesting thing. Kind of makes me wonder. And this was the second guy who went out and had, we got a hold of the pre-buy on this thing. And so I just wanted to see what the guy was complaining about. And this is an airplane, my understanding is it's got about 160 or 70 hours on it. I think it was maybe a 2018 airplane. And built by a guy, I guess he's either finished it at 75 or he is 75 right now, but supposedly it was his 5th airplane. And just because somebody's built a lot of airplanes does not mean they built a lot of good airplanes. It just means they built a lot of airplanes. And looking at the pictures of it, looks good. But I don't know if you guys can see it too much up here, but the very first thing that catches my eye is that this thing has an RPM indication of 4,000 RPM at full throttle. And it cruises like 38 or 3,600, whatever it is up there. And I'm thinking, if somebody flew this thing for 160 hours with these type of RPM indications, and it's an indication problem, it's a settings problem. And so I was trying to figure out what they had done, and the best I can figure out with math is that they have the pulses per revolution set at 3. And it would take me from power up to fixing it and back down maybe 60 seconds to fix that. And here it's 160 plus hours, and they just continued to fly this thing like that. Some of the other things they had going on in there, they were missing 2 exhaust risers had nuts missing, and so they're big exhaust leaks. Wires chafing. The oil temps were very, very high, up over 220. So there's some issues with the airplane. So it'll be interesting to see. On the other hand, the buyer is really interested in buying this airplane. And so we're going to go out and have a look at it and see. And if he does buy it, then he wants me to train him in it. And I have never flown an RV-14. So But that's the only RV I have not flown as a 14, so I want to get that one under my belt. So we'll see what happens there. So. No, I won't do that. All right, so this is a project I got involved in here just recently. This is my airplane. That is my wonderful 530 Wasp box. I absolutely love it. On the other hand, the story I'm telling myself is that it's getting old and it's time to replace it with something. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and put in a 750. And it was a great plan. I did all the math. I figured out that I had enough panel height. I think I needed 7/8 more of an inch to put in a 750. And so I went on ahead and I don't know, I think it took me 2 months to build up enough courage to tell Stein to go ahead and order the box for me. And that's a lot of money, I got to tell you. So I went on ahead and I figured this will be, I don't really want to say simple, but it is kind of simple. So these are all, what I did is I went into the 530 and I got all the pins and I figured out what they were and I marked them. And then I made my little sheet, figured, okay, I got to move all these wires over to this side on the 750. And so I had a lot of depinning to do. And I have a tip up, and you would think that that helps a lot. It doesn't. So if you go and you look at the sides of that hole right there, that's what I had to work through. And that was, it was entertaining. And one reason I wanted to do this now too is that as my years go up, it's getting harder and harder for me to be crawling around the airplane. And to be able to do this now, I thought, you know, I need to do this now. I was right. I do not want to do that again. So I had all these down, and I went and I brought my sheet down to Travis down at Stein Air. And he looked at everything because I had a couple of questions, stuff didn't quite transfer over. And because I figured I'm going to bring all the ARINC lines, which are steering commands, and serial lines over. And then Travis says to me, he says, well, my GDL 88 and my GDL 69, XM Weather and ADS-B, they don't get fed by serial line anymore. They get fed by Ethernet wire. Like, oh, missed that part of the problem. And the other thing they did too is they changed a time mark up here from 1 wire to 2. So I had a little bit more work than I had wanted to do. I was hoping just to do this behind the panel and be done with it. And my ADS-B and XM boxes are behind my baggage wall. So I went on ahead and I said, well, what's Ethernet cable? Well, shielded serial line is about an 1/8 inch diameter, and Ethernet is a 1/4 inch. It's like all the pass-throughs through my spar are full. I cannot put 2 big cables through that spar, so I had to drill a new hole in the spar carry-through. And by the way, if you guys get caught in having to do that, Vans actually has a document on where you can drill these holes, so that you within the strength requirements that they have. All right, so this is what my panel looks like now. The problem that I ran into is somebody was up visiting me, and they, while I was doing this transition, I had already done all the wires. And whoops, that quit. And so I pulled my 750 out and I set it next to 30. And I was looking at the difference, and all of a sudden my brain kind of got sidetracked because I'm thinking, that is not 7/8 of an inch tall. That's more like an inch. I messed up on my dimensions. And so now I had the problem, I had to come up with another 1/2 inch of movement to get this thing to fit. And so what I had between my 530 and my transponder and the 530 and the audio panel, I had a 1/4 inch space in between there. So I removed that. I was originally planning on doing that anyway. Then I took my transponder and moved it down as far as I could move it, which was a 1/4. And I moved the audio panel up. Instead of 3/8, I moved up 5/8 of an inch. And I got everything in, and I was looking at my canopy, and I thought, I wonder if this little channel is going to clear the plugs on the back of the audio panel. Yeah. So I closed the canopy, and I went into the mirror and my flashlight, and I'm looking. I had a grand total of 1/16 of an inch clearance. When I test flew the airplane, my knuckle just brushes the bottom of the transponder when I push in the throttle. I think we might say there's a little bit of luck in here. So, and I understand the role luck plays in success. And, the settings were, the first flight I didn't have the thing configured for the 750, so I had no ADS-B. And second flight I had that all fixed. And that worked really nice. It's a neat box. I still have a lot to learn how to run this thing now. But the most important thing is my autopilot still flies the approach. I have two-track autopilot, so we'll see what happens there. And lastly, this is my friend here, Dave Lawrence. Dave came to me a little over 5 years ago to get transition training because he wanted to buy an RV3. And so he came up, we did transition training in Tango Bravo, and then he, on his way back to Virginia, he was driving, he stopped in Tennessee to look at this RV3 he was interested in. And after he was in Tango Bravo, he looked at this RV3 and he thought, oh, this is not good. So we were chatting about it, and I said, why don't you just build your own? And he fell for it. He actually believed it. And he went on ahead and built this absolutely beautiful RV7, obviously tail wheel. And just in December, he did his first flight. Dave is 82 years old. 82. Insurance was, as expected, a bit of a problem. And so he's with a Vemco, and his first 10 hours are flying naked. But they will cover him after that with a hull insurance. That's really impressive. Now, just so you understand, I mean, I was on, for 5 years, I was on the phone or on texting with Dave almost every day as he was building this airplane. And he did an absolutely fantastic, stellar job of building it. I was down there, I think, about a year and a half ago to get him jump-started on his electrical. So, because that's the one thing that seems to stump most of you guys out here is the electrical system. But we got him through that, and he continued, and this thing is just absolutely stunning. So Dave, just so you know what his background is, he's military pilot, test pilot. And he's involved, he flew P-51s. They were doing, trying to make the conversion, I can't remember what they call it, the Defender or something, where they put a turbine into a P-51 airframe. He was test flying that. He was also involved in test flying the Honda Jet. So he's a very, very skilled guy. So, and he said the first flight went off without a hitch. So that's good that, congratulations for him on doing that at 82. And now, I don't know what I have built with the guy, but now he's looking for an RV3 kit. So I think I have made a monster. So we'll see. It's good. He absolutely loves it, though. Keeps him off the streets and out of the bars. So, all right, that's it.
Very good. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Great. Oops. Great. Okay, I think this is still working. If this, stand by, let me crank up the gain on this one just a little bit. Test, test, test. How's that sound? Okay, I'd like to now introduce our guest speaker. We typically have some guest speakers or guest personalities at our meetings sometimes, and a few months ago I was at a wedding and I ran into an old friend from the training department at Northwest. His name is Ray Wilson, and Ray and I got talking a little bit, and I knew Ray kind of a little bit back in the old days of the training department, but we weren't close friends. But as he began to tell me some of his story, it became kind of interesting that he's got a pretty interesting background as a pilot. You know, we're all pilots in here. I think we all have different stories of how we became aviators. Either we had some interest in it, or somebody we knew got us involved in aviation, and or we were just born with this desire to fly airplanes. There's something special, I think, about us all. For a brief time when I was lost in the world, I was a computer guy. And these guys, I know there's computer people in here, but they were not like pilots. And so the pilots that I knew always had these interesting stories. And so I think that was kind of the concept that Ray and I talked about. So let me give you a little bit of background about Ray. I had this in the newsletter, but I'd just like to read it again a little bit. Ray Wilson is our guest speaker this month. Ray always has dreamed of being a pilot, but being African American, pursuing this goal was not as easy as he might have thought. He was pursuing a degree in teaching. He decided to take the leap and began flying lessons. There, an instructor introduced him to a recruiter, and the rest was history. Ray joined the Army in 1969 to pursue this dream. After spending 366 days in Vietnam as a combat helicopter pilot, he continued his Army career that spanned 22 years and included positions as a flight school instructor, medevac pilot, chief warrant officer in the Army. After retiring from the Army, a job at Northwest Airlines brought him to Minnesota in 1990, where he held positions as an academic instructor in the training department, and later a test and ferry pilot on the Boeing 727 and 747-200. He returned to his rotorcraft skill roots in 2005, signing on with Lifelink, where he spent 8 years as a medevac pilot, flying a variety of Bell and Sikorsky equipment. Ray's retirement 2.0 has seen him active in Veterans Affairs, and he was featured in the Twin Cities PBS production of The Telling Project, Minnesota Remembers Vietnam. In 2023, he co-authored a book titled Brothers with fellow veteran Bruce Richardson, a story of two young men of the 60s from diverse racial backgrounds defining their early lives in Vietnam and then meeting 50 years later. So I'd like you to introduce and welcome Ray Wilson. Your mic and your clicker.
Oh, thanks, Doug.
There's your backup mic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Good morning, all. Doug and I have similar backgrounds. And we met, and like he said, we were workmates at Northwest in the training division. And okay, there we go. We were workmates at Northwest NATCO and lived through that, and he moved on rather quickly to the flying part. It took me a little bit longer. So I am here to talk to you about why it's important to write a book. Like Doug says, we all have unique aviation careers. Some of us were in the military, some of us weren't, but we still have a unique way of looking at our lives. So this is what we should write about. Give our ancestors, our wives, who probably don't care too much about what we do when we're not around them, and also, but for our children and our children's children and our relatives to look on what we have done. This way, there you go.
Should be able to hit the side of it.
Oh, that's up.
There you go.
I started out flying because I really just wanted to learn how to fly. I wanted to be a pilot. Youngest thing that I remember is my aunt telling me a story, taking me to the doctor for when I was going to school, first kindergarten, and said to me, we're going to go to get your shots and all that kind of stuff, get an examination. So the doctor came and gave me my shots and gave me my little, first exam, and he says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a pilot." And the doctor goes, "You ought to try to be something that you have a chance of being." I don't remember it, but my aunt does. And when I graduated from Army Flight School, she found that doctor. Called him up and said, "You remember? That boy is now a pilot in the United States Army." So I was in college, and everybody says, be a teacher. So I was going to be a history teacher. So about my junior year at little school, Glassboro State in South New Jersey, I decided one afternoon, I am going to learn how to fly. This is what I've always wanted to do, and I'm just going to do it. And so I went to one airport in the local area, and the guy says, we don't have time, we don't have an airplane, we don't have an instructor. So I went, okay, there's another airport. So I went over to that airport. And I got the same thing. So I said, I'm not giving up. I'm going to go over to the next airport. And I walked in, and the guy goes, what do you want? I went, I want to learn how to fly. And he looks at me for a couple moments and he says, sit over there. So I sit over there. And about 20 minutes later, this guy comes out, little short guy, says, I hear you want to learn how to fly. And I go, yeah, I do. And the guy looks at me for another moment and says, when do you want to start? And I go, now? And he goes, yeah, we can take you up now, because we'll give you that $5 thingy, you know. And so we got in the airplane, and it took me on a pre-flight, got in the airplane, stuck me in the left seat, showed me how to start it, let me taxi, showed me what to do, got me out on the runway, said, push this forward, hold this, pull back gently right now, and we were flying. And I looked over at him and I said, you know, this is the first time I've ever been in an airplane. It was my first lesson. So he went, wow. So it started. So I soloed in about 10 hours and all that. But one day I was sitting around for a lesson, and he introduced me to this one guy that came in and had Bonanza. And the guy, we chatted for a little bit, and he goes, I'm going over to Harrisburg. You want to come? I went, yeah. Of course I do. So we get over there, and he buys me lunch, and he says, I got to do some business. I'll be back in about an hour and a half. So he lets me fly his airplane back. And he just tells me all about flying and stuff. And from that moment on, I said, I have found my community. I know where I'm going to be, you know. So I almost joined the Navy because they came over to our college and said, you know, they're big screen with a projector and jets landing on aircraft carriers, and I said, that's what I want to do too. So I took all the tests, passed everything, went to Willow Grove Naval Air Station in Pennsylvania and took a physical, and the last part is the eye test. And I flunked. I had 20/25 vision, and they said, you could be a naval flight officer. And I said, what's that? He sits in the back or sits on the side and all that kind of stuff. And I go, nope, I want to be a pilot. Not going to do that. So went back to school and graduated and running out of money to learn how to fly. So my instructor said, the Army will take you. So I went down to the Army recruiter that day or the next day and took all the tests, and I passed them. Took the physical, and the doctor says, walk over to that wall, and I stopped at the wall, and he says, you pass, you can see. Yeah. Yeah. So when I got so I joined the reserves and got my affairs together, and then in mid-1969 I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. And I hated it. We flew in that night, and drill sergeants came on the airplane, rousted us all off, put us on our hands and knees, picked up butts and bolts on the ramp, got inside, we yelling and screaming, calling us all kinds of names, and took off all our clothes, almost, put on these other things, you know, green stuff. Oh, it was horrid, you know. And I thought to myself, what have I got myself in for? And we had this at 8 o'clock in the morning, we had like hamburgers and stuff like that. And I was real distressed. So we got to our barracks and they said, you guys got a couple hours. So I got up on the top bunk, did not know anyone there, and I started crying, you know. And a guy below got up and said, are you all right? And I went, no, I'm not all right. And he goes, would you like to have a cigarette? Let's go out. So we went out on the back steps, and that guy became my best friend forever. We were both going to flight school and all that kind of stuff, and so we got through basic training. His name was Tom Barnett. Never, ever forget him. So anyway, got to flight school after basic, and the Army didn't get me glasses. So after our pre-flight training and all that kind of stuff, we were going to a flight line, so I had a week of just watching people fly. And got my glasses and started flying. And I soloed I was the last one in my class to solo, but I was the second one in my class for hours. So I really fell in love with helicopters. I thought they were the greatest things going. So we were at Fort Walters, Texas, and after that we went to, that was basic flight training and some tactics. And then we went to Fort Rucker. And we got our instrument ratings, and we got tactical ratings, and we got our first Hueys and all that kind of stuff. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Hueys. It's the greatest aircraft there is. Really, they are. 1950s, mid-1950s, they are the first turbine-powered helicopter. They are the longest, second largest production aircraft. Anybody know what the first military production aircraft is, largest amount? You're close. It's the B-24 with almost 1,900 examples of it. The next one is the Huey. Yeah. Production-wise, it's the B-52 and the C-130 and the Huey. Anybody know how many Medal of Honors were, most Medal of Honors won by an aircraft? Close. It was the B-17. Yeah, there's like 26 Medal of Honors. And then the second one is the Huey. The Huey and the B-24 both have 9. Yeah, so it's a really spectacular little aircraft, and I have 4,500 hours in it, and I still love it today. Wrong way? Yeah, there we go. When we were about ready to graduate from flight school, about the 2 days before, we were out there in formation, and we got our orders. And every last one of us, of my 85 classmates, we started out with over 200, and 85 of us graduated. We're all going to Vietnam. So we went, wow, okay, that's what we're trained for. I was hoping to go to Europe, but, or back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, but it wasn't happening, not in 1970. So we were kind of milling around, and one of our training officers come up and said to us, hey, do you have your buddy here? Do you want to get your buddy home from Vietnam? And we looked at it, what does that mean? He goes, yeah, tell your wife or mother that you want them to be your escort officer. And if you get killed, you can get your buddy out of Vietnam. So Tom and I looked at each other and said, you're going to be my escort officer. And we made that agreement. And so when we graduated, we told our mothers and all that. And I had met his mother and he had met mine. So, but we both forgot about it, of course. So in, what is it? May 28th, 1970, I graduated from flight school. On July 7th, I arrived in country. I arrived in country, and they put us in this big room, and they give us a chance to pick our area that we want to go to, not quite the unit. So I chose 3 Corps and 4 Corps, not the North part, because I was told that that was not good for pilots, you know. So I chose down there, and I got I got into 2 units. My first unit was the 118th Assault Helicopter Company at Benoit, and my second unit, I was there for about 3 months, and they stood down. And then I got into another unit, the 117th, 118th first, and then 117th. And it was a really good unit. These are 2 of my hooch mates. The guy on the left here, as you're looking at him, I'm still in contact with him today. Pete is down in Florida, and he was a elementary school teacher for 30 years. You know, and he was in the Guard and all that kind of stuff. And there I am as a young warrant officer, trying to show a little pride in what I am. And some of the other guys, we had cookouts and all that kind of stuff when we weren't flying. Some more of the pilots. One of my co-pilots who decided to express his feelings about the situation. And, you know, being pilots, we like dogs. So we kind of had a dog with our platoon, and our dog kind of got into liked marijuana. And the first sergeant just loved this dog. And he was like, "Can I borrow your dog?" And he would let the dog loose in the enlisted barracks, and he wouldn't punish anybody, but you know, like he would let the dog go and everybody's marijuana, because that's what the dog liked. And the dog drank beer and, you know, whatever we would give him, really. There were 2 types of missions in Vietnam. We had direct combat support missions and combat assault missions. And for the 117th Assault Helicopter Company, we did equal amounts of both. And what we would normally do is have about 3 days of assaults, where we would actually go with from 5 to 20 ships. We would have 2 companies sometimes go and lift troops in. And it was really exciting. I remember my first time, I was flying really, really close. You know, in school, they don't, you know, you got to have safety there. It's got to get the troops down all at one time. So what we would do is we would fly closer and closer to each other, and you could see the EG probes in the exhaust and of the aircraft before you and all that. And you'd get down, and I thought, this is real exciting. Wow. you know? Nobody shooting at me or anything like that. I remember the first time because I was expecting whole bunches of stuff like that. So about the first month was mostly like that. And then one time we were going into an area near the Cambodian border, and all we had, there was bad guys in the trees and about a battalion. And before we were about a mile out, we could see the artillery. I mean, boom, it was like in the movies. I went, man, there's artillery coming in, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And then we're half a mile out, and then there's F-100s, A-1s, all that. They're dropping bombs and all that. I said, this is really exciting. You know? I'm just going, wow, this is really cool. And then our gunships were short, we're doing a little flare and we're coming in, and our gunships are unloading and all that, and I'm going, gosh darn, this is real exciting. And then an RPG goes right between my aircraft and the aircraft in front of me, and I almost pee myself. This is serious. You know, and there's kind of bullets flying all over the place, and these guys don't want us to land here. So I went, oh. So I smoked cigarettes at the time, and as soon as we got out, the biggest drag, almost like smoked half the cigarette in one drag. So we drop off our troops, we're going out to the pickup zone, and we're going to pick up more, and we're coming back in, and now it's my turn to fly. And my aircraft commander is telling me, get closer, get closer, get closer, get closer. And I'm going, okay. And we take a little fire then, but mostly not. And then the third time we come in, it was, you know, the bad guys had said, maybe we should leave. So that was my first combat assault where I got shot at. Yeah, and it was quite interesting. In Vietnam, just like in World War II, Army aviation, they had symbols for the battalions. And you can see right here, there's an X on the aircraft. And we had diamonds and we had stripes, and they were for battalions. And just like if you see in World War II, there'll be diamonds on aircraft or triangles on bombers and things like that to identify their unit. And so that's where we were. And this was the 145th Combat Aviation Battalion aircraft. And these are Bravo models or Charlie models, and they're gunships usually. And I flew D and H models, but mostly H models. The second part of our mission was resupply, combat resupply. And you could do anything combat resupply, anything at all. From doing reconnaissance work to bringing out food, to bringing out mail, to bringing out ammunition, to doing just about anything. And I've done just about anything, you know. So it was those were the real interesting missions, but also those were, to me, the most dangerous because we were always out by ourselves. We didn't have a horde with us. And if something happened, you were out by yourself. And this is where I got shot at and shot down the most. All right, well, shot down once, but still shot at the most when I was out by myself. And this is sort of the land was just beautiful. It was a beautiful place to be, I thought. And being a pilot, you didn't see all the little the holes in the ground and stuff like that, the real war as you were flying about. It was just beautiful rivers. Yeah. Typical Army or aviators. This was our company. Our company was the Warlords. So I was Warlord 19, and it's a call sign. And I was in the 1st Platoon, and 1st Platoon was Annie's gang from Little Annie Fanny from Playboy. Yep. So, and our guns were the Snakes, and the 2nd Platoon lift was the Pink Panthers. So we had Annie on the front of our helicopters sometimes, on our platoon. And we had a general officer come through one time, I was there, and said that we were too risque. Yeah, and we had to only show her from the shoulders down from then on. Oh, I'm sorry. From the shoulders up. Yeah, we wanted it that way, but anyway. This is one of my most memorable missions as a resupply guy was on this top of this mountain right here. It's called Nui Ba-Din. And Nui Ba-Din was had a radio relay station on top. The U.S. had that. It was near a place called Tay Ninh. And the bottom, we owned the bottom, but the middle and the inside was owned by the VC. So the only way up there is by helicopter, and the only way to resupply them was by helicopter. So one day I did about 10 trips up on that top of that mountain just to bring in supplies. And the first sergeant, and the very last trips, it's like 5 o'clock, it's time to go home, And the first sergeant for that unit up there comes up to me and says, "We have one more trip. Sir, could you just do one more trip?" And I went, "No, I'm not. I'm going home." And he says, "Please do one more trip." And I go, "What is it?" He goes, "Beer." And I went, "Yeah, sure." Yeah, so we go back down to Tay Ninh, and there's like cases and cases. I can't even see my crew. This is our heaviest load. So I just barely get off the ground, and I fly around a little bit. And I land on the mountaintop, and smiles. Everybody's just going nuts about this, And they take all the cases off, and we take off, and I go down the mountain because I'm really happy with what I did, exhilarated. And sure enough, I get shot at right there. Just, oh, God. And luckily, nobody hits me. So we're heading home. And the crew chief says, "Sir, guess what?" I go, "What?" "They left us a case of beer." Yeah, so the 4 of us had a 6-pack of beer each when we got back. Yeah, that was really a good mission. So I told you about my best buddy, Tom Barnett. Well, he was flying Cobras. He got an in-country transition to Cobras. And he was up in the northern part of the country. And we had talked a couple times by telephone and, try to keep in touch. So I'm out on a mission. And I get this call from my headquarters, or from our operations, saying, "Warlord 19, you got to come home right now. Come back to home base." And I go, "Okay, why?" And he goes, "You're going to be an escort officer." And I go, "Okay, what's that?" And, so when I was coming back, I'm asking the crew, "What's an escort officer? What do they do?" So I get back and I go into operations and says, "What do you guys need me for?" And the guy goes, "Tom Burnett?" And I go, "Yeah, just talked to him about 2 weeks ago. Well, he got killed, and you have 30 minutes to get yourself together and catch a plane back to the States. So I processed that right there and went, what? Went back to my little hooch, got my bags together, and caught a flight to San Francisco, through Narita and to San Francisco. And I don't really remember any of that, any of the flight at all. It was just like, But when I got to San Francisco, I had a 2-day class. They gave me a new uniform, new greens and all that kind of stuff. And it gave me a class on what I do as an escort officer. And it was the hardest thing that I've ever done. Did anybody ever see the movie Taking Chance? Yeah, Northwest Airlines is prominent in that movie. You know how everybody really looked out for that escort officer, how they really kind of took care of him. That didn't happen to me. I was shunned. Nobody looked at me. Nobody talked to me. I had like 3 stops to get back to Parallel, Tennessee, and I would get off the airplane first and have to transfer my buddy's coffin and all that kind of stuff. And it was, nobody even looked at me, cared, not the ground crew, not anybody. I felt not just invisible, but shunned. It was a terrible experience until I got there. Now, I know Tom's mom and all that kind of stuff. But when I got there, the funeral director was there, and one of the hardest things, I hadn't really seen Tom in a month or 2 months, and I had to examine his remains to make sure that his uniform was correct, and that was my job. Then I had to go over and talk to his mom and all that kind of stuff, who I knew, and it was tough. It's the hardest thing I think that I've ever done. But then I also had to officiate at the funeral. I mean, not the funeral, but at the gravesite. And I think that's the second time I've ever cried in the Army, when I was in the Army. Was when they folded the flag, and my job was to give the flag to his mom. And just to get that stuff out. This is a token of our gratitude by a grateful nation for your sacrifice. It was something to get ready for. So I spent a couple days there, and then I went on back up to my hometown. I had a week in New Jersey, and it was hard on my mom. And that's the other thing. Those of you who have been in a combat situation, we're tied up with the adventure of war. We've been trained to do what we're going to do. And we want to see if all that training works or not. And so it is really amazing how we're anxious to get there, anxious to do this, and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's our parents or moms, who really are the bravest, because my mother never swayed from her support of me and what I was doing. When I was in basic training, I called and asked her to get me out of here. and she went, Raymond, this is what you always wanted to do. So get off the phone and do it. And then here it is. She put me on a plane to go to Vietnam, and then she put me on a plane to go to Vietnam again. That kind of stuff, knowing that she knew what could be the outcome, because she knew Tom too. So I got back to my unit in Vietnam, and instead of feeling anger or, I'm going to make these people pay for my loss, I decided that I was going to be the best helicopter pilot, and I was going to support my troops, any troop that got on my board my aircraft, or I was going to, resupply them. So that's how I got through the war. And I got through the war without a scratch. Yeah, it was kind of amazing. And out of my class of 85, 12 of us were killed. Yeah, in the war zone. There were Chinooks, really outstanding helicopter. We used to write things on grease pencils. One of the first things I was told when I was a co-pilot and I was going on my first operational mission was, "Do you have a grease pencil?" And I went, "Yes, I do." And the guy goes, "I don't want to hear anything out of you." He used some other words. Anything out of you, but instruments are good, and you are writing down all our troops that we're hauling, or supplies that we're hauling. And frequencies, that's what we used to put our frequencies up on the board, so we could easily look at them. I had a birthday in Vietnam, of course, and I went to, I took a flight to Saigon. I got there early in the morning, and I think about 9 o'clock I was running around half drunk and hit every bar and all that kind of stuff. And on the way home, the crew, my company crew, knew that I was in a sorry state and did a couple of high G maneuvers, and I threw up out of the aircraft. But, it was, the camaraderie of flight crews was really good. I knew that I had really made it as a pilot. I mean, got the respect and all that. When my crew chief, when I climbed in the seat of my crew chief, seat of my aircraft on the left side, and the crew chief handed me all my straps over me and helped me into the seat. Instead of me just doing it myself, he was there to help me. Slid my armor plating up above. This aircraft right here is my first command. This is my aircraft and I had that for the next 6 months. Then I had to get another one. But yeah. This is Saigon River, just north of, I think northwest of Saigon. Long Ben is the largest military supply depot in the world at the time. And some of the outposts we used to fly to, and there's Nui Bai Din, Black Virgin Mountain, and some of the rivers that in the Delta were just all over. That was the main routes of communications for the VC and for everybody. And over to the right, as you see it, or left, that's the South China Sea. And we got to go across that a bit. And one of the airfields around there, Plantation Army Airfield, and there's another look of Long Ben. I took a lot of pictures. I started out with a 110 camera in flight school, and I got to Vietnam, and they told me that won't do. So I got a 35 millimeter and just started taking lots and lots of pictures, but mostly of the crew and people and the scenery around. It was kind of exciting, to say the least. I looked at it that way. I was scared half the time, But, you know, I expected that. And there's our dog right there, and there's one of the other pilots in my platoon, and some of the areas that we looked at. This is down in, on a day off, I went down to Vung Tau, which is in-country R&R, and it had great French Vietnamese food and all that kind of stuff. And some of the marketplaces that they were there. And I'm not sure what city this is, but this is a good-sized city in Vietnam, not a village or anything like that. And that's on the outskirts. That's how of Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City today. Vietnamese troops, of course, and Vietnamese people. Yeah, I really did like to take pictures of our crew chiefs, our gunners, the other pilots, and things like that we, just to keep everybody sort of honest about who they are. And there's typical helicopter companies, revetments, and a good old Huey taking off. There are 6 helipads in Saigon. They were named Hotel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we used to go to a Hotel 5, which was the free world pad, they called it, because of the other countries that were supporting us. Australia, South Korea. There are a couple more. But anyway, I used to go to all the USOs. I decided that I was not going to be hungry. And anytime I got a chance to stop to eat, I ate. So there was a time where I could tell you where the best hamburgers, hot dogs, French fries were in Vietnam. There's a typical village, low leveling across. Yep, that's an M60 machine gun. And we had 2, one on each side. The crew chief had one, and our gunner had one. The crew chief was in charge of the ship, really. And the gunner was in charge of our weapons on the ship, and the assistant crew chief. So they were really kind of the bravest guys, because we had like armor seats, and they just sat out there in the wells by the transmissions. They would do all kinds of things, help the troops off, put some supplies on and off, and help look out. Besides, shoot guns at people. As I said, it is a really pretty land. There's the harbor. There's downtown Saigon. There was a little place, it was like a picnic bench. And this guy would have soup, and I would go there every chance I got when I was off to Saigon. I would go to this one place, Vietnamese place. Didn't speak a word of Vietnamese. He didn't speak a word of English. But I ate his soup all the time. There's one of our crew chiefs. And again, the city of Saigon itself, or Ho Chi Minh City. And there is the outskirts of Saigon. Let's see the little white pad over the water. That's our helipad. That's where we landed for Vietnamese Army headquarters. Our dog, pothead that she was. I have to tell you about another mission that we had. One time I was coming back after about 8 hours of flying, and I was the last one in, and they had an emergency resupply. The emergency resupply was to take a hydraulic hose up to a 175 artillery unit that was right on the Cambodian border, and they had to have it up and ready. So I was the last one in, and so I'm going out. It's dark. I did do a lot of flying at night in Vietnam. But I headed up there, and I found the place. And I was out of the helicopter talking to another warrant officer, a grunt warrant officer, artillery warrant officer. And we were just chatting away, you know, and they were getting the hose out, and they got it out. And I was about ready to say, goodbye, see ya. And the VC decided that I had stayed too long and started dropping artillery all around that fire support base. So my co-pilot was running the helicopter from idle back up to full throttle as I ran to the aircraft, jumped in the aircraft, and as I was strapping in, we were taking off. And we could see where the mortar rounds were coming from, because you could see a little flash out of the barrel. And we gave a call to the area artillery, and they put artillery on those positions. So those are some of the exciting moments besides just flying around. And I flew 13 hours one day. I flew 28 days in a row one month. And we were only supposed to fly 110 hours a month. After that, you could get an extension by going to the flight surgeon. Well, I did 110 hours and went to the flight surgeon 3 times. And, yeah, and every time he goes, "How do you feel?" I went, "Okay." He goes, "Okay, you can go fly." You can go back flying. Yeah, so it made the time go by really fast, because there were, like I say, very few times I would have 3 days off. I took R&R, and that was probably, besides being an escort officer, my longest time without flying. This guy, this was our door gunner, and his name was Randy Hogg. I'll never forget Randy. Randy was the purest of our crew, meaning he was about 19 years old. He had just gotten married before he left Vietnam. His wife just loved him to death. She was a nurse or something like that. She wrote him every day, you know, literally. The rest of us, we had gotten our Dear John letters like on the second day there. No, really. In fact, when I first got to my unit, they asked me, are you married? I go, "No." "You got a girlfriend?" Yeah, I do. And he goes, "You'll get a Dear John letter." And they did a poll on when I was going to get my Dear John letter. No kidding. I had to tell them I was honor bound. So, but it made it a lot easier. I mean, you know, when you think about it, you know. So that was that. But anyway, Randy was just the nicest guy, always positive, always positive. I would look back at him, and if he was frowning or looked anxious, I was worried. Because most of the time, that's how he looked. And when he'd get a letter home, after a couple of months or so, he'd get a letter from home, we would make him read his letters to us. Oh, yeah. And he would do it. But he was just the finest guy, finest gunner. Yeah. I took this picture because we weren't supposed to be there. This is in a place called Snow, Cambodia. And we weren't supposed to be there, so I said, I got to document this. Yeah, and this is one of my crew chiefs. There is my crew chief right there. And me flying along. This is the guys in our aircraft commanders. We were each aircraft commanders in our platoon, and we did the 4 of us did most of the combat assaults in our unit. And this is near the end of my tour in Vietnam, so we were working with Vietnamese and not U.S. troops only. So we wouldn't have the big, super big combat assaults that we did with U.S. troops. We would have small assaults with Vietnamese. So we were all aircraft commanders, and like I say, I tried to keep everything as light and happy as I could, and I would I would eat anything just about, so I cut that off and all that, and sliced it up and had pineapple one afternoon while I was flying. Here's one of our helipads, another one of our crew chiefs in our barracks, and we got 2 dogs. And this is my personal weapon that I took. I only shot a weapon once while I was in Vietnam. When I was a co-pilot, we were coming into a combat assault, and we were taking fire, and I was getting kind of angry at all this, and also was kind of scared, so I took out my .38, stuck it out the door, literally, stuck it out the door, pulled the trigger 6 times, put it right back in, and went, yeah, I'm better. Of course, in the officers' club, I was the butt of jokes for about a week. Did you kill anybody? That kind of stuff. But I did go out because I wasn't a very good shot, so I thought, and I got this from special ops guys, so I would put that on my seat, and I carried about 6 clips of ammo and all that kind of stuff. Never got to use it, thank God. Anyway, here's one of our pads at Plantation Army Airfield, not pads, but runways. The fixed-wing guys used to use this all the time. And Chinooks again. And this was the 117th. This was our real emblem or thing, was the Warlords. Again, some of the other crew chiefs. And this is going home. I stopped flying about a week, 5 days a week before my DEROS date, and I sent me over to the replacement center, and that's where I got the extra day in Vietnam. So that was my plane, Seaboard World. Yeah. Flying Tiger used to come in there all the time, stuff like that, for all the guys that know about older airlines. And I got home. This is on the way home. When I got home in Travis Air Force Base, I was going through customs, and it was like early in the morning, and the customs guy got my bag up there, and he's going through, and he says, this old guy says, of course everybody's old then, I was 24. He goes, where are you going? And I go, New Jersey. He says, you flying there? I go, yeah, I am. This is California, isn't it? And he goes, get to the airport, San Francisco airport, before 8 o'clock. And I went, okay, I'll try to do that. So, because it was like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, so I got there and I went up to the USO and got all my traveling uniform, so my mom would be proud of me when I got off the airplane in Philly. And when I was coming down the stairs this after, and I looked out the front gate, out front doors, and the demonstrations. There was at least several hundred people out there, the guys who had to go through that. It was like a gauntlet. This was in 1971. It was really tough, you know. But like I said, I didn't have to deal with that. So I got back to Philadelphia. I wonder if I have this. There I am. Got back to Philadelphia, and my mother's waiting for me at the airport. And like all good aviators, when I graduated from flight school, I bought a new car. You know? What else am I going to do with my money? So anyway, my mother pulls up. There, she has the car. And I get out, and, you know, I haven't driven a lot. So I get in my car, and I'm really excited, you know. And it's rush hour. So this car, you know, I try to pull out, and I don't know how to drive, really. And this car almost hits me, and so I get out of the car, and I call him everything but a child of God. Right there. I mean, you know, get back in. And then I said, oh, my mother's sitting right there. You know? And my mom looks at me and says, Raymond, your language has changed. So with that, I tried to curtail my use of four-letter words. Yeah, that kind of thing. But anyway, so that was my time in Vietnam. First combat tour. I also decided that I was going to stay in the Army there, and this is where personnel really helped. Because I went over to say I was going to be volunteer, you know, for duty as a reserve officer on active duty. And the sergeant says to me, do you like Vietnam? And I go, no. And he goes, don't go back to the States. Go to Europe. Because if you go back to the States 18 months, you're going to be back in Vietnam. So I went, no, I don't want to do that. So he says, go to Europe. I guarantee you, 3 years there, year and a half back, this war will be over. That's how I got to Germany. And also, he was absolutely correct. Because the war ended in 1975, and I had 6 months in Fort Riley, Kansas then. But anyway, I was talking to a couple guys, and I was stationed in a place called Schwäbisch Gmünd, right there. And it was Pershing missiles. It was field artillery, and it was a really great tour. I got to my unit, and everybody was really, they partied a lot. Drank a lot of beer. I didn't like beer until I got there, and then I did. It was just amazing. I flew Hueys here, and I'll go back to here. Flew Hueys there. I did 3 tours in Germany. I did a tour with the field artillery, and then I did a tour with ordnance in a place called Pirmasens, right there. And that was my best tour ever because I would ride a bike. I had started riding bikes then and I'd ride into France to get cheese and wine, and I go over to the Rhine Valley and buy wine and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a great tour, great tour. Then on my back in Kansas, I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was an instructor pilot there, but I was also what is it called, the assistant division commander's pilot. So I did that for quite a while, and then I got staff jobs, and I was an operations officer and assistant for the brigade aviation. I went back to Germany. And then I came back to Fort Riley, and I went to a medical unit. And I was the standardization officer for that unit, which I never really appreciated what medical evacuation units do. But I did here. We did a thing called military assistance to traffic and safety. And so we would go out and pick up people from highways, do hospital transfers. I had a baby born on my aircraft. You know, that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we did, we were sent down to Honduras. And in Honduras, I worked for a field hospital. I was there for 6 months, and that was when the Nicaraguan thing was going on and the El Salvadorian thing was going on. And I had this very long ride on a C-130 from Manhattan, Kansas, down to Pomarola, Honduras. You know, that kind of stuff. But anyway, we did all kinds of things there. And it was not technically, but I got shot at in Honduras. Actually, when we were going into Nicaragua to pick up wounded freedom fighters, as we would like to call them. You know, that kind of thing. And this is my crew chief and medic, and we flew almost every day. Working for a hospital, you could do almost anything. I used to work triage on my day off and stuff like that, so it was really amazing. It was really an education that I really took on. It was like my best 4 years in the Army, was flying medevacs. Then I got a transition. Well, okay. At least 8 times I applied to Department of the Army for a fixed-wing position. At least 8 times. And the first 7 times, they said I was too young. You know, we're only taking WF4s and, you know, and guys that have been around and all this, you know, for a long time. So I went, okay. Then when I was at Fort Riley, I got promoted to W4. I applied again. And then they said, you're too old. We're only taking W2, W3s now. Oh, God. I go, okay. Then they go, well, we can send you to Black Hawk School. I went, oh, I'll take that. So I went down and to Fort Rucker, and I learned how to fly Black Hawks. And this is a real amazing aircraft. It just 190 miles an hour. Oh, yeah. And cruises 150. Fully IFR, moderate icing, you know. And I went back to Germany with this. And I thought it was just the greatest aircraft there was. Even over at Huey. It flies marvelous. So when I got back to Germany, I went to an armor unit. Armor division. And all I did was sling load ammunition and fuel bladders all over the place for the tanks. But, you know, since I was an instructor, I got to fly IFR all the time, any place I wanted to go, just about troops, for training. So I really kind of loved that. Then that's when I turned 20 years into service, was there. And I knew that I couldn't get out without having some kind of work, so I had to go back to the States. So we have 2-year commitment to take a stateside assignment. So I went to Fort Ord, California. That was wonderful. It's a beautiful place. The aquarium, Monterey, you know, all kinds of stuff. I'd play golf right next to Pebble Beach, you know, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I was in Panama. like half the time. 3 in Panama, 3 months back at Fort Ord. That's what I did for 2 years until a little thing in December 1989, Operation Just Cause, where I got called in at Christmas, just before I was going to go on Christmas leave, and we were going to go and do combat assaults. We were going to be part of that invasion. So we flew helicopters over to, or Blackhawks over to, Monterey. C-5s, 4 C-5s came in, landed. We pushed our helicopters in them, and we took off, and we landed at 1 in the morning at Howard Air Force Base in Panama. And by 3 in the morning, we had unfolded our rotor blades. I had picked up a marine company. Yes. A marine company, and black night vision goggles all the way across to the other side of the canal. We were going to secure that end of the canal, and that's what we did. So in essence, and then 6 months later, I retired. So I started my career in combat, ended my career in combat, like that. So, yeah, here we are in Panama. We went from, my division, the 4th, went from about Panama City all the way across to Costa Rica. We took all that land in there, got rid of all the PDF, Panamanian Defense Force, and it was exciting. So, getting down to modern times now, I was looking for a job, and when I was getting out, and I sent out like 30 resumes, and I made like 15 or 20 cold calls, because somebody said, that's what you do. And I got 3 job offers. One in Togo, flying for an oil company. One flying for the Defense Department in not the Philippines, but the Marshall Islands. And then some guy told me about Northwest Airlines. They needed flight instructors. So I applied there, and they said, come on out. So that's how I got to Northwest. They looked at me and they said, oh, you got 2 engine aircraft. And I went, yeah, they have 2 engines on them. And they go, well, you'll be in the 757 department. I went, okay. Yeah. So I did that for about a year, and I thought, this is really kind of neat, flying simulators. Not really, I was in a classroom mostly, simulators a little bit. And NATCO had a contract with the Zugflug, German company, aviation, airline. And it was kind of a combination of East German pilots and West German pilots. Because the countries had, Germany had come together. And I was teaching these 2 German pilots, and they started speaking German. And then I told them in German that I speak German, so stop talking about me that way. But anyway, it was, I really kind of liked it. I liked the teaching and all that. But I decided that, I don't have an airplane ratings other than a private. So I got the GI Bill. So I went and started doing that at Wings. And some of you might have known Brian Addis gave me all my check rides. Yeah, gave me all my check rides, and I'm honored to call him a friend. You know, that kind of thing. He's, yeah, taught me a lot about airplanes. And then Northwest decided they had a internal hiring program, and that's what Doug got in on, and I made the application. And since I was pretty old then by the time I got there, but Northwest had just lost, not just, but lost an age discrimination suit, so hey. So they put me in 727s, and I got my ATP through that for free. I mean, you know, I was really excited. But then one day they said, the next day after my class, they said, you can have a class date in October. This is in September. You can have a class date in October. Do you want it? And I go, yeah, I do. And so I was teaching systems, and all of a sudden there was a big kerfuffle out in the hallway, and I walked out there, and there's a big screen, and 9/11 happened. And the airlines just, and everybody who was in class were laid off, and a lot of other people were laid off. And I was lucky because I wasn't in class at that time, so I got to do test and ferry. I ferried aircraft down for storage, and then when they got back up, I brought them back into service, and that's what I did. And I was pretty close to 60 after a couple years of that, so I said, nah, I'm going to retire from Northwest, and I got 15 years in. So then I went back to flying helicopters. And there's one of our aircraft, one of our 7.2s, the old bird. I really love that aircraft. Just is a gem to fly. You know, being a first officer was like a voice-activated autopilot. You know, you stood up and you go, how high and how fast and where are we going? And so I first started flying part-time helicopters with North Air Care. And when I decided to retire from Northwest, they weren't really into hiring at that moment. So I went across this, that's me at North Air Care, and we flew really fine little Augustas, just wonderful aircraft. You know, and that's what they have. So I went across the street almost to Lifelink. So I got hired by Lifelink full-time, and I flew out of Hutchinson for a year, and then I flew out of Flying Cloud for a year, and I flew out of Anoka for a couple, 5 years, 6 years. 6 years out of there. And then, you know, time to retire. So I have 3 retirements under my belt. And we used to fly, this aircraft is the Bell 222, and there's one of our nurses. And it was a 2-bladed, you know, but it had the same rotor system as a Cobra did. And we had weather radar, we had an autopilot, and I just love flying this bird. I would go IFR any day in the week with this, and I did. No helicopter is really beautiful, but once you get inside, that's what you do. Now I fly little airplanes, and I love it to death. We were talking over there before, and I said, you know, I really like the idea that I don't have to fly if I don't want to, you know. And so I go out and fly 2-3 times a month, and do traffic patterns, point landings. I'm going to put my wheels down on this point right here, and all that kind of stuff. And I just love it to death. So anyway, that's what I do in aviation. One thing I like to say about all you guys who build your own airplanes and fly like that, I'm really impressed. I just think you guys, this is real flying, I think, to build your own airplane and to do it. And if you look at the history of things, that's what it used to be. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you guys have any questions? No questions? Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
Ah, you're more than welcome. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray. Great. Hey, Bernie, would you bring up the drawing pot up there with the books and and we'll get our door prizes going here. And you're supposed to do that. Yeah, if you haven't got your name in the pot, get your name in the pot.
We'll wait.
Yep, we'll wait. Turn the lights on while we're doing that.
Right up there, right?
Yeah, if you haven't signed up, go up there at the little table there by the coffee pot.